All right, so another important skill that I'd like you to have for exam one, and that I'll be testing, is the ability to determine if a particular setting is an observational study or an experiment. We can extend a little bit on this too as well, and I'll talk about how. But the difference between an observational study, this is what we've been talking about in the previous sections, right? This idea of surveying people and asking them a question. Those are observational studies versus an experiment. In an experiment, we go out and we impose a treatment on people, right? So this involves us telling people what to do. And it can be something like take a drug, eat this amount of vegetables per day, or even more subtle, like watch this ad and then tell us what you think about this brand. So those are examples of us telling people to do something. The other way would be, have you taken, or how many servings of vegetables do you eat per day? Just asking. Or have you seen this ad? Those are observational studies versus our experiments. Another big important difference between the two, and just one thing you do is identify. Another is the purposes and sort of when you have to use what. Experiments are the gold standard in statistics. If we could do everything as an experiment, we would, because experiments are the one time in stats that we get to use causal language. If we have done a good randomized experiment and controlled for confounding variables using randomization, we can say at the end of this experiment, X causes Y. If you take our drug, you will see these results. There's obviously some variability associated with that. Not everybody will see the same results, but we can use causal language. If we do an observational study, we can at best say, well, these people aren't like others. So think about like nutritional supplements or something. If you did this as an observational study, you would just go out and ask people, do you take a vitamin each day? A multivitamin. And the people who would say, and so maybe you did some measure of health and you found the people who took multivitamins were healthier. But the people who take multivitamins are different than the people who don't take multivitamins. It's just a fact of life. They may tend to be healthier. They may be more health conscious. They may be people who work out. I have no idea what influences people to take a multivitamin, but they are different than the people who are not taking them. Whereas in an experiment, if we ask people to take multivitamins and we randomly assign them to take a multivitamin or not, if there's a difference, we can attribute that to the multivitamin. So observational studies versus experiments, we get causal language versus not. Now, if the gold standard is an experiment, why would we ever do an observational study? Well, because in a lot of cases, we can't force people to do something that might be harmful. So there's a lot of times we have to do observational studies. So think of everything related to pregnancy. If we think such and such might influence premature births or whatever it might be, we can't ask women to do that. All we can do is see, have you done this? And see if that leads to premature births or birth defects or whatever we might be studying. So if we're concerned that it might have an adverse effect, we cannot do that as an experiment. There's a good example that I don't have in this, but I'll put up on below this on Canvas, is this example of this SALT study they did, where they actually had inmates in a prison be fed differing levels of salt. They ran an experiment, a randomized experiment on inmates, giving them like a low level of sodium, medium level of sodium, high level of sodium to like look at hypertension. I mean, ethical considerations be damned. So generally, if there's ethical problems, that's where you're going to end up doing your observational study. So we do have one example to try out with this. So at this point, if I were you, I'd pause the video and give this an attempt. Yeah, I was trying to think whether or not I'll put it in the quizzy thing, but I'll do it here. All right. Oh, look, the prison assault study. I did have it here. Okay. So hopefully you paused and you came back. If not, pause now. I'm waiting. All right, so you should have chosen B for this question. If you chose A, I'll tell you a common mistake. It looks like we have a group of adults who swim was evaluated for depression. It turned out they were less likely to be depressed than the general population in a second study. So they did not do a good job of telling us, but this is study number 1. And we didn't ask people to do anything. We just asked if they were swimmers, right? We went to apparently a pool and asked them to take some depression test. And in the second study, a group of 100 volunteers was randomly divided into 2 groups. There's our random assignment. The first group was asked to swim twice. The second group did not follow an exercise plan. So most of the students who accidentally choose A, they got distracted by this first and second group and not the first and second study, because we never said first study, and that distracted them from that. And again, we get at this idea of this first study. All we can say is people who swim are less likely to be depressed, but we're not saying that swimming will help your depression, because all we know is that swimmers, well, they exercise and maybe they're healthier, and so they have no, there's all sorts of confounding stuff. So B is the correct answer to that, and I don't know if I'll make a question or not.